My father's breath was hot against my ear as he leaned over and whispered, "For years wasted on a useless degree, your brother made partner without all this nonsense." I sat frozen in my graduation robes, surrounded by 3,000 people celebrating the greatest achievement of my life, and felt the familiar sting of tears I refused to let fall. But what my father didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that in exactly 7 minutes the Dean of Stanford University was going to read an announcement that would change everything, including the balance of power between us that had existed since I was born. I had spent 31 years as the invisible child. The forgotten one. The afterthought. The daughter who existed in the shadow of her golden brother, a shadow so large and so dark that sometimes I wondered if I had ever truly existed at all or if I was just a ghost haunting the edges of my own family photos. My brother, Christopher, was 18 months older than me and approximately 18,000 times more important in my parents' eyes. He had been born with a natural charisma that drew people to him like moths to flame: coaches, teachers, girls, and most importantly, our parents. Christopher was the starting quarterback who took our high school team to state championships. Christopher was the homecoming king with the perfect smile. Christopher was the one who got the bedroom with the private bathroom while I got the converted storage closet next to the laundry room. And Christopher, according to my father, had done everything right. He'd skipped college, entirely talked his way into an entry-level position at a prestigious law firm, and clawed his way up to junior partner by the age of 30 through a combination of charm, ruthlessness, and a moral flexibility that I found deeply troubling. He billed clients for hours he didn't work, took credit for associates' research, and played golf with judges in ways that skirted ethical boundaries. But none of that mattered to my father. What mattered was that Christopher wore expensive suits, drove a German car, and made enough money to buy a house in the suburbs that my parents could brag about at dinner parties. Meanwhile, I had committed the unforgivable sin of pursuing knowledge. I discovered my love of neuroscience in my freshman year of college, in an Introduction to Brain Science course I had taken only to fulfill a requirement. Professor Catherine Webb stood at the front of the lecture hall and explained how neurons communicate, how memories form, how consciousness emerges from 3 pounds of gray matter, and something clicked inside me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I graduated summa cum laude. I got into Stanford's PhD program, one of the most competitive neuroscience programs in the country, with a full fellowship. I spent 6 years, not for like my father insisted on misremembering, studying the mechanisms of Alzheimer's disease, working 80-hour weeks in the lab, publishing papers in peer-reviewed journals, presenting at international conferences. None of it impressed my family. "When are you going to get a real job?" my mother would ask during our monthly phone calls. "Christopher just closed a huge deal," my father would announce every Thanksgiving, never once asking about my research. "Must be nice to be a professional student," Christopher would smirk, sipping whiskey that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. I learned to stop talking about my work. I learned to nod and smile when they discussed Christopher's latest achievement. I learned to make myself small, invisible, forgettable, because that was easier than fighting for attention I was never going to receive. But today was different. Today, I was graduating with my PhD. Today, I was Dr. Miranda Ashford. And today, whether they cared or not, my family was going to sit in that auditorium and watch me walk across that stage. They had tried to skip it, of course. "Christopher has a work event that weekend," my mother had said when I first sent the invitation. "We'll try to make it," my father had added, in a tone that clearly meant they wouldn't. I had done something I never do. I pushed back. "This is the biggest day of my life," I said, my voice shaking with a rage I had suppressed for 31 years. "I have spent 6 years working toward this. I have sacrificed everything. And you're telling me you might not come because Christopher has a work event?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. "Fine," my mother finally said. "We'll be there." They arrived late, of course. I had saved them 3 seats in the front section reserved for families of graduating doctoral students. Prime seats, close to the stage, with an excellent view of the ceremony. I had sent them detailed instructions about parking, timing, and where to meet. They showed up 20 minutes after the ceremony started, shuffling down the row, making everyone stand up to let them pass, my father grumbling audibly about the traffic and the parking prices and the uncomfortable seats. My mother air-kissed my cheek before I had to return to the graduate section. "You look tired, sweetheart. Are you eating enough?" Christopher didn't come. He sent a text that said, "Congrats," with no punctuation or emoji. My mother said he had an important client dinner and couldn't get away. I pretended that didn't shatter something inside me. But the worst part, the moment that will be seared into my memory forever, came halfway through the ceremony. I was sitting with my fellow graduates, listening to the keynote speaker discuss the importance of curiosity and perseverance, when I felt my phone buzz. It was a text from my father. He was sitting 30 feet away, in the audience, at my graduation, and he was texting me. How much longer is this going to take? Mom's hungry and these seats are murder on my back. I didn't respond. 20 minutes later, just as the dean began reading the names of the doctoral candidates, my father leaned over from his seat in the family section. I was close enough to hear him, and whispered to my mother, "I can't believe we drove 5 hours for this." Christopher's law school graduation was only 2 hours. "Christopher didn't go to law school," my mother whispered back. "He never went to college, remember?" "Well, whatever. This is endless." I stared straight ahead, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth might crack. And then my father caught my eye. He leaned forward, cupped his hands around his mouth, and whispered loudly enough for several people around us to hear, "4 years wasted on a useless degree. Your brother made partner without all this." 6 years. It was 6 years, not 4. But he couldn't even be bothered to get that right. I said nothing. I just turned back to face the stage, where Dean Catherine Morrison was approaching the podium with a folder in her hands. I had no idea that folder contained the key to my entire future. Before we continue with the reading of names, Dean Morrison announced, her voice echoing through the massive auditorium, "I have a very special announcement to make. This year, the Stanford Neuroscience Department received an unprecedented grant from the National Institutes of Health, the largest research grant in our university's 134-year history." A murmur rippled through the crowd. I felt my heart rate increase, though I didn't understand why. I knew about big grants in the abstract, the way you know about lottery winners or lightning strikes. Things that happen to other people. This grant, Dean Morrison continued, totaling $2.4 million over 5 years, was awarded to support groundbreaking research into early intervention strategies for Alzheimer's disease. The lead researcher who will receive this grant and direct this initiative is a member of our graduating class today. The auditorium went silent. I felt lightheaded. My research was on Alzheimer's. My dissertation was on early intervention strategies. But it wasn't possible. Please join me in congratulating the recipient of the Morrison Hughes Research Grant, our newest Doctor of Neuroscience. Dr. Miranda Ashford. For a moment, I didn't move. I couldn't. The world had gone fuzzy at the edges, and I was distantly aware that people were clapping, that my fellow graduates were turning to look at me, that someone was saying my name. $2.4 million. The largest grant in Stanford's history. My research. My name. I stood on legs that didn't feel like my own and made my way to the stage. Dean Morrison was beaming as she shook my hand, and the Chancellor himself had appeared from somewhere to present me with an oversized ceremonial check. Cameras flashed. Someone handed me a microphone. My voice cracked. I cleared my throat and tried again. "I don't know what to say. I've spent 6 years in the lab, often alone, often wondering if anyone would ever care about this work. Alzheimer's disease affects nearly 7 million Americans, and that number is growing every year. This grant will allow my team to continue developing early detection protocols that could," I had to stop, overwhelmed. "That could change everything for millions of families. Thank you. Thank you for believing in this work." The applause was thunderous. I walked back to my seat in a daze, clutching the ceremonial check, my mind spinning with possibilities. $2.4 million. A team. My own lab. Recognition. And then I saw my father's face. He was staring at me like he had never seen me before in his life. His mouth was slightly open. His phone, which had been glued to his hand all day, had fallen into his lap, forgotten. My mother was gripping his arm, whispering something urgently, but he didn't seem to hear her. I sat down. The ceremony continued. Names were called, degrees were conferred, and through it all, I could feel my father's eyes burning into the back of my head. His phone buzzed. I know this because he startled so violently that several people turned to look at him. He fumbled for the device, stared at the screen, and went completely white. Later, I would find out what that message said. Later, I would understand why he looked like he had seen a ghost. But in that moment, I just watched him read something on his screen, watched his hands start to shake, and watched him turn to look at me with an expression I had never seen before. It looked almost like fear. The reception after the ceremony was held in the faculty courtyard, a beautiful space with old oak trees and string lights and tables covered in white linen. I was surrounded by well-wishers, professors, fellow graduates, university administrators who had barely known my name an hour ago and now wanted to discuss collaboration opportunities. I was in the middle of a conversation with the head of the biotech department when I felt a hand on my elbow. My father. He looked smaller somehow. Diminished. The confident, dismissive man who had whispered insults during my graduation ceremony was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. "Privately?" I excused myself and followed him to a quiet corner of the courtyard, near a fountain where the splashing water would mask our conversation. "That message I got," he began, then stopped. He pulled out his phone, stared at it, and shook his head. I don't understand." What message? He handed me the phone. It was an email from his boss, Victor Hammond, the CEO of Hammond Biomedical, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. The same company where my father had worked as a mid-level operations manager for the past 15 years. Frank, just saw the Stanford announcement. Is Dr. Miranda Ashford your daughter? The Miranda Ashford who just received the Morrison Hughes grant? We've been following her research for 2 years. Her early detection work is exactly what we need for our new Alzheimer's initiative. If she's your daughter, I need you to ask if she'd be willing to consult for us. Name her price. This is priority 1. Victor, I read it twice. Then I handed the phone back to my father and started laughing. It wasn't funny, not really, but the irony was so sharp, so perfect, that I couldn't help myself. For 15 years, my father had dismissed my education, my research, my entire career as worthless. For 15 years, he had compared me unfavorably to Christopher, who had never published a paper, never contributed to human knowledge, never done anything except accumulate money and status. For 15 years, he had made me feel small and stupid and invisible. And now his boss was asking him, begging him, to introduce me. Stop laughing, my father snapped. This isn't funny. It's a little funny. Victor Hammond has never, he stopped, struggling for words. He's never emailed me directly. Not once in 15 years. He doesn't even know my name most days. But he knows yours. He's been following your research. My father's voice cracked. He thinks you're important. I am important, Dad. The words came out quietly, but there was steel behind them. I've always been important. You just never bothered to notice. He looked like I had slapped him. That's not, he started. You spent my entire graduation whispering about how I wasted my time. You didn't know what my research was about. You didn't know I was up for this grant. You didn't know anything about my life because you never asked. You never cared. I took a breath, fighting to keep my voice steady. Christopher made partner at his firm by billing clients for work he didn't do and playing golf with judges. I just won the largest research grant in Stanford's history for work that could help 7 million Americans. And you still spent today comparing me unfavorably to him. My father opened his mouth, then closed it again. So no, I continued, I won't consult for Hammond Biomedical. Not because the opportunity isn't interesting, it is, but because I'm not going to let you use my success to boost your standing at work. You don't get to dismiss me for 15 years and then name drop me to your CEO. Miranda. I'm Dr. Ashford. I straightened my shoulders, feeling for the first time the full weight of those 2 words. And I think this conversation is over. I turned and walked back to my reception, leaving my father standing alone by the fountain. 3 months later, I was sitting in my new lab, a beautiful, sunlit space in Stanford's brand new research building, when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. Dr. Ashford? This is Victor Hammond. I nearly dropped the phone. Mr. Hammond. How did you get this number? I have people for that. He sounded amused. I understand you turned down my offer to consult. I did. Through your father, no less. That must have been satisfying. I couldn't help but laugh. It had its moments. I'm not calling to pressure you, he continued. I'm calling to apologize. I shouldn't have gone through Frank. I should have reached out to you directly, professional to professional. That was disrespectful, and I'm sorry. I was silent for a moment, genuinely surprised. CEOs of major pharmaceutical companies didn't usually apologize to anyone, let alone young researchers they'd never met. I appreciate that, I said finally. The offer still stands, not through Frank, just between us. Your research is exactly what we need for our new Alzheimer's initiative. Full control over the project, your own team, equity stake in any resulting patents. Name your terms. I thought about it. I had every right to say no again. I had my grant, my lab, my independence. I didn't need Hammond Biomedical or Victor Hammond or anyone else. But I thought about my grandmother, who had died of Alzheimer's when I was 12. I thought about the 7 million Americans currently living with the disease, the millions more who would be diagnosed in the coming years. I thought about my research sitting in an academic lab versus reaching the market, helping real people, making a real difference. I'll consider it, I said. But I have conditions. Name them. First, my father is not to be involved in any capacity. This is between you and me. Done. Second, I want complete control over the research direction. No interference from your marketing team, no pressure to cut corners. Done. Third, I want a seat on the board of your Alzheimer's initiative. Not advisory, voting. There was a pause. That's unusual for a consultant. I'm an unusual consultant. You said my research is exactly what you need. Prove you mean it. Another pause. Then Victor Hammond laughed, a genuine, surprised laugh. I think I understand why Frank was so insistent that you were wasting your time. You're not easily managed, are you, Dr. Ashford? No, I agreed. I'm not. Welcome to Hammond Biomedical. I'll have my people draw up the contract. The news broke 3 weeks later. Dr. Miranda Ashford, recipient of the largest research grant in Stanford history, had joined Hammond Biomedical as Chief Science Officer for their new Alzheimer's initiative. The announcement made the front page of the Wall Street Journal, got covered in Nature and Science, and trended on Twitter for a full day. My phone exploded with messages. Former classmates who had barely acknowledged me during graduate school suddenly wanted to catch up. Distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years sent congratulations. My LinkedIn grew by 10,000 followers overnight. And then there was my family. My mother called, crying. I always knew you would do something amazing, sweetheart. I always believed in you. I didn't bother correcting her. Christopher sent a text, heard the news. Impressive. Maybe you can put in a word for me? Hammond has a huge legal department. I didn't respond. And my father sent an email. It was long. Longer than anything he had ever written to me, certainly longer than any conversation we'd ever had. He talked about his childhood, growing up poor in Ohio, watching his parents struggle. He talked about his fear that his children would repeat his failures, and how he had decided early that financial success was the only success that mattered. He talked about Christopher, and how easy it had been to understand a son who valued money and status because those were things my father understood. And then he talked about me. I didn't understand you, he wrote. I didn't understand why you would choose years of school over a steady paycheck. I didn't understand what you were working on or why it mattered. I told myself it was because your work was impractical, but the truth is, I was scared. You were smarter than me by the time you were 10 years old, and I didn't know how to relate to you. So I dismissed you instead. I belittled your choices because I was afraid of what it would mean if you succeeded. It would mean I was wrong about everything, he went on. I was wrong. I was wrong about your degree, wrong about your research, wrong about what matters. You're going to help millions of people, Miranda. You're going to make a difference that Christopher and I never could. And I'm proud of you. I'm sorry it took so long for me to say that. I'm sorry I missed your whole life because I was too stubborn to open my eyes. I read the email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long time, feeling something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet. But something. Recognition, maybe. The smallest crack in a wall I had built over 31 years. Last week, I visited my parents for the first time since graduation. It was awkward. Uncomfortable. My mother hovered and overcompensated, asking about my research with the desperate enthusiasm of someone who wanted credit for curiosity she had never shown. My father was quiet, watching me with an expression I was still learning to read. But at dinner, something happened. My father asked about my work. Not about money, not about status, not about how it compared to Christopher's career, but about the actual science. He asked what Alzheimer's does to the brain, how my early detection methods worked, what I hoped to accomplish in the next 5 years. I talked for an hour. I showed him diagrams on my phone, explained protein tangles and neuron death and the heartbreak of watching someone forget the people they love. He listened. He asked follow-up questions. He nodded in places that showed he was actually paying attention. At the end of the night, as I was leaving, he stopped me at the door. I got something for you, he said, looking almost embarrassed. He handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a frame. And in the frame was a copy of my Stanford graduation photo, the one where I was accepting the ceremonial grant check, beaming at the camera, looking for the first time in my life like someone who belonged on that stage. I hung one in my office, he said quietly. Right behind my desk. Victor Hammond saw it last week when he came by for a meeting. He said he was glad I finally came to my senses. I stared at the photo, then at my father. Thank you, I said. He nodded, blinking rapidly. Drive safe, Dr. Ashford. I don't know if my father and I will ever have a normal relationship. 31 years of damage doesn't disappear with one apology, one email, one framed photograph. There are still moments when I hear his voice in my head, useless degree, wasted years, your brother did it without all this, and I have to remind myself that his opinion never defined my worth. But I have learned something in the past year, something that took me far too long to understand. Success isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's not about revenge or vindication or watching the people who doubted you choke on their own words. Those things are satisfying, I won't lie, but they fade. The rush of seeing my father's face at graduation, of reading his boss's desperate email, of knowing I had finally exceeded every dismissive expectation, that rush is gone now, replaced by something quieter but more durable. Pride in my work. Confidence in my path. The knowledge that I made choices based on what I loved, not what I was told to value, and those choices led me somewhere extraordinary. My grandmother died not knowing who I was. In her final months, she would look at me with confused, frightened eyes and ask who the stranger in her room was. I was 15. I held her hand and told her I was a friend. I didn't correct her when she forgot again 10 minutes later. I started studying neuroscience because of her. I specialized in Alzheimer's because of her. Every late night in the lab, every rejected grant application, every moment of doubt and exhaustion, she was the reason I pushed through. And now, with $2.4 million in funding and the resources of one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, I am going to make sure other families don't have to watch their grandmothers disappear. That's not useless. That's not a waste. That's my legacy. And no one, not my father, not my brother, not anyone, can take it away from me.